I've seen a lot of people rush to buy the cheapest wine fridge they can find, only to end up with a unit that rattles like a refrigerator in a moving truck, spikes in temperature when you open the door, or just gives up after a few months. The regret is real because you spend good money on a hobby and end up with a glass that's either too warm or too cold, and you wonder if you should have saved a little more and bought something sturdier. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon, and today I'm going to walk through whether the ROVSUN 160 bottle dual zone cooler feels like that smarter buy. First off, the biggest hesitation most buyers have is the fear of committing to a built-in unit that they can't move later, or that will hum loudly enough to ruin the ambience of a home bar. I spent a weekend setting up a test kitchen in my own dining room, installing the cooler under the counter exactly where the manufacturer suggests. The front vented design means you don't need extra clearance behind the unit, but you do need a few inches of space on each side for airflow. Once it was plugged in, the unit settled into a quiet hum that was barely audible over a conversation. That's a big deal for anyone who wants a wine cellar that blends into the background rather than becoming a focal point of noise. The dual-zone feature is the first thing that separates the ROVSUN from the typical single-zone bargain models. You can set one compartment to about 55F for reds and another to a crisp 45F for whites, and the touchscreen lets you fine-tune each zone in 0.5F increments. In practice, I tried storing a bottle of Pinot Noir I'd been aging for 3 years in the red zone, while a set of Sauvignon Blancs I bought for a summer dinner stayed in the white zone. Over a week, the reds stayed perfectly supple, and the whites retained their bright acidity. The real test is consistency, and the built-in low-vibration compressor kept the temperature swing to less than a degree even when the kitchen door opened frequently. That's something cheap compressors can't promise. They usually overcompensate, leading to temperature spikes that can ruin a delicate vintage. Capacity is another talking point. 160 bottles sounds massive, but the interior layout matters. The ROVSUN uses adjustable shelves that slide in and out without tools, so you can fit larger format bottles or even a few champagne flutes on the side. I placed 3 Magnum bottles of a special reserve on the top shelf, and the unit handled the extra weight without any sagging. The downside is the width. At 24 inches it fits most standard cabinets, but if you have a narrower alcove you'll need to check measurements twice. Also, because the unit is built for built-in installation, the back is not insulated for freestanding use, so if you ever decide to move it, you'll want to keep the original ventilation space to avoid overheating. One of the quieter wins is the activated carbon filter. Many wine coolers rely on a basic charcoal filter to trap odors, but this one actually has a replaceable cartridge that you can slide out from the rear panel. I kept the cooler stocked with a mix of reds, whites, and a couple of Ross, and after a month there was no hint of a refrigerator smell creeping into the bottles, something I've experienced with cheaper units that just recirculate the same air. The filter does add a maintenance step. You'll need to replace it roughly once a year if you keep the door open a lot, but that's a small price for preserving aroma integrity. Now, who should consider buying this? If you're a serious enthusiast who wants to keep a sizable collection organized, and you already have a dedicated cabinet space or are planning a remodel, the ROVSUN offers the kind of temperature stability and flexibility that most entry-level models can't match. It also makes sense for small restaurants or wine bars that need to separate whites and reds without buying 2 separate coolers. On the flip side, if you're only looking to store a handful of bottles for occasional weekend dinners, the 160 bottle capacity is overkill, and the built-in design may feel restrictive. In that case, a countertop single-zone cooler with a smaller footprint could be more economical and easier to move. Practical strengths are easy to see. The dual-zone touchscreen is intuitive. You tap, swipe, and the temperature changes in seconds, and the display stays lit just enough to see in a dim dining room without becoming a glare. The low-vibration compressor not only protects delicate wines from agitation but also keeps the unit quiet enough that you can run a movie night without the hum getting in the way. The flexible shelving means you can reconfigure the interior as your collection evolves, and the carbon filter keeps off flavors at bay. Weaknesses are more subtle. Because the unit relies on a compressor rather than a thermoelectric system, It does draw more power, around 115 watts on average, which isn't a huge bill but is something to